crazy. Can't walk, can't talk, can't eat, can't sleep. Oh, I'm in love. Oh, I'm in.
Go. Good to go now.
Okay. No, it's music now only coming through.
Take a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you,
All right. That moves us to item 4 on our agenda. And under A, naming of the buildings. We've talked about this before and appreciate the input regarding some of the areas that have already been designated in the past. So let's open for some discussion on the naming of the buildings.
Lee Mousick, I agree with Charlie that the names that are in place down there should belong there. It was, I got the county to put Rod Bayo's name on that second field. So I know, I always consider that very important. But I have some ideas, and I hope the rest of you do too, for historic names. People who have been left out. I guess I'll start.
Good.
I think I told you a little of my research at the last meeting on the donation of that preserve over there. That was John and Harriet Dunning. Residence. He was a fairly prominent nature photographer. Had done a lot of work down in Central and South America. Wrote a couple books. They bought that from Martha Redd's niece. Martha sat on that property for a long time, even withstanding pressures to sell to development. Wouldn't do it. When she died, left it to her a niece. I didn't know. I knew Martha, but I didn't know the niece. Anyway, the niece decided to sell it. And the niece sold it to John and Harriet Dunning. It amounted to about 40 acres over there. And he carved out an acre or two for himself and donated the rest. The county or the conservative. They gave all that preserved land to the public. And of course, we've seen in the years since how it evolved and how pristine it's been kept, maintained. And I think that I would suggest that we at least name what I'm calling the community house. For John and Harriet Dunning. Obviously, the preserve adjoins the town's land there. And I just think that was an enormous contribution to this island. The last, or one of the last, hammock areas left in Southwest Florida. I believe it's the last, I can't remember. But I think it was an enormous contribution to this island. I suggest putting their names on. I've written down a name, the John and Harriet Dunning Community House for the community building. I'd like to see us get away from this word center. That's up to everybody else, but I suggest the John and Harriet Dunning Community House.
Thank you.
As far as the entire complex goes, an idea about that too, but I don't know how you want to do this. Want to go building by building, or
Certainly, because I mean that's what item A is, just naming of the buildings, and if you've got something else that you wanted.
actually, I What happens when you get old, you can't forget a
I've
word.
heard that.
You get
I
a-
mean, I'd hate to know,
But I wrote them down.
but thank you.
Um, And I know we talked about, this idea of, some people wanted to get back to Estero Island rather than Fort Myers Beach. And that's not going to happen to rename a town, of course, but we probably can incorporate the name, the island's name, in some of the things we have out here. And let me I want to be sure I get this right. Just bear with me a minute. Well, it's gone. Anyway, I wanted to incorporate that name into the campus rather than the Fort Myers Beach. I know we want to do away with, we want to get away from Bay Oaks, we've said. I did, I guess. I don't. So I thought I would suggest a name like the Estero Island Community Commons. That's just off the top of my head. I would like to see more island contributor, historic contributors' names on some of the buildings. I don't know if that'll work or not, but I was very active at one time in the Beach Historic Society. I was president for 4 years or whatever, and so I'm biased. I have a special interest in that. I think those women have done a fantastic job over there at keeping our history. If any of you have been over there, I'm sure you've seen the wonderful photo exhibit they have of old Fort Myers Beach. If you haven't, you really should go take a look at it. Just terrific photographs of all the way back to the 30s, some in the 20s. When it was permissible to drive on the beach. Actually, it was a state road for a while. All the 20s and 30s cars lined up on it. But anyway, so I'm a little biased on that. But I think women like Fran Santini, A.J. Bassett, deserve their names on something on this island. Perhaps we could do something about that down at the new Commons. Those are my ideas. So please
Thank you.
join in, somebody.
Yeah. You didn't mention Martha Red.
Well, yes. There's so much to say about Martha. What a wonderful woman she was. That's up to you all. And of course the council, but yes, absolutely. I think, in my opinion, Martha Red has to be on something on this island. I think, when that place was originally turned over to the public, it was for a while called the Martha Red Preserve. I don't know whatever happened to that. It suddenly was something else. And I guess, I think maybe I was away when that happened. I don't know. But originally, for a while, people called that the Martha Red Preserve. That name is gone now, obviously. And I think we need to bring that name back. Probably not, well, I don't know. Probably not on the preserve, but somewhere in a town facility or...
With regard to that Martha Red Preserve, was that part of what is now called Matanzas Bay Preserve? Okay, because, and would
Shown
that,
that land.
was that in addition to what we have as Bay Oaks property? Or was that,
No,
that was separate?
that was separate, I believe. I don't know that Martha owned, she didn't own where the school is. So she didn't own where the ball fields are, to the best of my knowledge.
She didn't own any of the part that actual Bay Oaks property is on, the
But
campus
I
is
know,
on, no?
no, I don't believe so, no.
It's
It was all of that preserve land.
it's now called the Matanzas Bay Preserve.
Yeah. That she sat on, under pressure. And some people have told me a lot of pressure to sell and develop.
Right.
She refused to do that. So,
Thank you, Lee. Karen, did you have
I do.
some names?
I don't have some names specifically, but kind of looking at this from a different perspective. We need more money. We're going to build the facilities and the kind of new recreation center, whatever you want to call it, we need more money. So while we can respect historical in some way, shape, or form, I don't know what that is yet, but I think we have to look at how are we going to raise this money? And are donations included in that? And maybe it's donations for naming rights of buildings or, you know, plaques for certain sponsorships. And we create categories of sponsorships and people basically contribute to that to help us fill that gap of probably another $5 million in there, raise money for this. So what that looks like or what those names are at this point, it would be really hard to say, but I think we need to have some kind of fundraising campaign to go along with all of this to help increase that money that we can do what we want to do. So specific naming rights or anything like that, I have no idea what they would be yet, but I think we really need to look into fundraising mechanisms for this.
I agree, and I think the mechanism from which that could be possible would be through the Friends of Bay Oaks, simply because they are a 501c3. I don't believe a
Right.
municipality can engage in a fundraising campaign. Certainly, they, through their 501c3, would be in a position to affect such a project, and I think your idea is an excellent one. We could do both, I think, and, you know, and I'm most interested in the property that is primarily Bay Oaks property and where that came from, and, you know, to recognize those people. I would love to see Matanzas Bay Preserve renamed Martha Red Preserve, simply because that was the person that donated that property. That would be the appropriate place for her name. With regard to A.J. Bassett, I think her appropriate naming opportunity would be somewhere with the beach school or the grounds of the beach school, because she was the principal there for so many
Right.
years. So I think that...
Her mother was the principal.
I'm sorry?
Her mother
Mother.
was the principal.
Right, the mother, but in any event, the Bassett name then would live on. The family name would live on, which I think is, you know, there's a wonderful legacy there. So I think that, you know, you're both correct in terms of, you know, the approach that we should take with regard to naming. I think it's kind of almost premature to kind of make a decision with regard to these buildings. Number one, as you mentioned, budget is a huge issue. The two people who spoke during public comment really recognize that, as we all do. And if you remember, these were pie in the sky, conceptual, if it's a perfect world kind of approach that we had and the council had with regard to, let's look at what's possible. We didn't really take into account what is financially feasible, because we understand that that conversation was going to happen later. You bring a vision to the community, and then you can see if it can work financially. And I think Roger has done a great job in terms of looking at what's already in the reserve for Bay Oaks. That's money that has been set aside, And in addition, to look at what mortgage opportunities or loan opportunities would be available for making this plan a reality. So I think that the naming, number one, would have to occur if there is an initiative by Friends to engage a development person, probably on contract, to put together a capital campaign where you have these levels of giving. So a naming of a building would be $1 million, a naming of a room would be, $250,000, that kind of thing. I have a question about Al Order, though, because, Lee, you brought up that Al Order weight room. Did he actually ever give any money, or was it just the beach recognizing his Olympian status?
I don't know. I wasn't involved in that, so I don't know. Maybe Charlie knows.
If you want me to answer,
I do.
my understanding is that he did in fact fund the creation of the weight room, buying the weights and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Can I swear to that?
I heard that too, Charlie,
Oh,
but I don't know that.
Yeah, I'm like Lee. You guys know, I was on the advisory board long ago.
Yeah.
Al was, very much involved in the creation of that weight room, and I believe that he did in fact finance it.
Okay, that's good to know. So converting that existing space to a weight room was what he funded,
Yes.
because that building was already there.
Oh, yes, yes.
Right.
My understanding was that he purchased the actual weight machine, that sort of thing, and funded the conversion, as you say, of that space into a legitimate weight room.
Weight room. Okay, great. Good to know. I don't know. Karen, are you have other thoughts?
No, I just, I sit on the board for Lover's Key, Friends of Lover's Key, and we are in the process of building that huge new state-of-the-art Discovery Center. The building itself was paid for by the state of the state parks, but the Friends of Lover's Key have been responsible for all the interior and what goes in there and that type of thing. And over the past year and a half, we've raised almost $5 million. And we had a person that we hired designated to that effort. That is what she does. That is her total job, is fundraising. She started as contract and then whatever, but it's possible. And people are out there and they want to be part of things. And especially with the history on this island, to rebuild that, I think it's a viable option for us to help finance and fund this, but, and be respectful of the historical side too. So I just think it brings another avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got a problem with this. We're an advisory board, so I think we need to get deeper into this. I really would hate to see Dairy Queen Gymnasium or the Geico Community Center.
No,
I'm afraid of, but sometimes it comes to that. And these corporate names, I just am opposed to that. We have people on this beach who donated more than money. They donated all of their time. They donated land. They kept a preserve on this island. Geico may give you a couple $1 million, but that doesn't mean we should go get it and put. I would like to hear from the town manager again, if we can, on exactly what, maybe I misunderstood the money end of this. I believe it was you that came up with the $5 or $5.5 million. Is that in reserve? Is that money we have for this redevelopment?
Morning.
Good morning, Roger.
Well, I think it's appropriate we're talking about history here, so let's talk about history for a second. The history of this project was that the town, through a land development application, received a lot on Estero Boulevard that was a potential new entrance to the park. The project was to develop that lot, not to redevelop the entire park. However, in looking at what that entrance should be and the current state of affairs of the park, it made sense to look at the entire park, and it was totally appropriate to envision the entire park's potential. Included settling the land issues with the school board, included settling land issues with the county, and try to put together a vision for the future. I think this committee and other members of the community who've come to a variety of stakeholder meetings have done that. The net effect of that is that what was contemplated to be spent has changed significantly. Improvements to the park were always intended to be done in phases. Never intended to be the park for 2 years and rebuild the whole thing. It was intended to be done in phases because we knew we had a money limitation. Our money limitation is that, much as you all are tremendous stewards and lovers of Bay Oaks, people who are lovers and stewards of Times Square, there are people who are lovers and stewards of Bayside Park. And our thought was that to try to get the widest community support was to try to do improvements at all three locations. Now, we don't know what the end result will be in terms of grants and other things we may potentially receive, because we're basically still in the planning design phase. And hopefully external monies will be able to be brought to bear, not only the ones that Karen was talking about, but others. But that being said, math was pretty easy. We said, we saw what does the smallest guy need? What does the middle guy need? And then everything that was left for Bay Oaks. So based on my understanding of the current numbers, that potentially puts Bay Oaks in the $4 to $5 million range. Now that could change depending upon some of the issues at the other facilities in terms of as their designs go forward, what stays in and what comes out. But it was never intended to fund the entire rebuild of Bay Oaks, basically as if it was almost virgin ground, or raw ground. It was meant to be done in phases, and we would go as far as the money took us. And then we would work to raise additional monies prospectively to complete the other phases. So that was a financial scheme. The intent was to borrow $10 million, and there's a mechanism to borrow $10 million or less. There's a mechanism to borrow $10 million or more. Problem with the $10 million or more is that the cost of borrowing goes up exponentially, and it's not in proportion to the amount you borrow. So, just to give you an example, you know your cost to borrow $50 million is the same as your cost to borrow $15 million under that scenario, once you're going out for bonds and things of that nature. So that was the reason we try to keep it at $10 million, because our cost of financing would be the lowest of that scenario. That's why we kind of set that as a threshold. So we have a lot of work to do. Besides finalizing the design and finalizing the phasing, you know, we've made tremendous progress on the land issues, and we hope to have those resolved in the next, 30 days or so. Is to look at, when we go to bid, to look at the bids once we get the prices back in and do some value engineering. Let me just give you a very simple example. If we can configure the field so they don't interfere with the existing building, rather than remove that existing building and replace it with something, maybe we don't do anything for 5 years. Building. Perhaps we would like to. Whether that's replace it with an aeronasium, replace it with a record, or refurbish it, or whatever it is, maybe we do that last. We don't do that. So there's a lot of things that we have to do between now and then. Now, if you say to me, well, you see a scenario where we'll have all the money and it won't be a problem, and then the answer to that is obviously no. We won't have enough money. But my vision is to, some people who will feel that, well, if you don't have it all, you won't get it done. My belief is that if we can get 70% of it done, we'll get the other 30% of it done. And whether that's through grants or donations or naming rights or grant, other sources of monies or whatever it is. So we're gonna have to make some decisions along the way, and I'm sure this committee will be an integral part of making those decisions in terms of value engineering certain things, decision points that we'll be honoring along the way. And so I don't know if I really answered your question directly, but all I could say is that we really felt it was important to try to, because as much as you all and I know the gentlemen in the audience love Bay Oaks and love the programs there, that unfortunately doesn't encompass everybody on the island. And I want to try to be sure that this capital initiative touched somebody in some way. That's why it wasn't limited to one project, one site.
Well, what is the cost right now of the current design? Hasn't that been figured?
Well,
30% of the.
no. The answer is no.
Well, there is a design right now.
Well, there's a concept plan. Design is the actual cost. So for example, so right now I think you all, if I remember correctly, you all have said we had the 3 buildings and does it have to be 3 separate buildings? Could it be one bigger building? And the buildings be built in phases, or do they have to build them all at once? These are things that are being looked at now, and all those things, of course, will have cost implications. So, we'll know what it costs when we bid it. That's when we'll know what it will cost. Everything between now and then is an estimate. You can sit here and say it's X number of square feet at $100 a square foot and come up with a number. That doesn't mean anything. Right now, the economy is a little bit depressed, so we may get more competitive pricing than we might have gotten a year ago. We don't know. The only way we'll know is when we put it out to bid. So, you may heard Chelsea or Allison or one of the other staff members, make these statements that these projects died the death of 1,000 cuts. So as we try to be so specific to figure every single thing out, what happens is you lose project momentum. In this case, you may lose a financial window for both interest rates and construction competitiveness due to the economy. So we have to be careful that we don't get in our own way. And there are decisions that have to be made that are irrevocable decisions. You make that decision, you can't, after you bid it, go backwards and say, we're not going to do that. There's a lot of decisions that can be made after you bid it. Project. So, for example, we can have meetings on what the field material should be. We could say, let's bid an alternative. How much is the price for X? How much is the price for Y? How much is the price for Z? Those three prices, and then we could determine which one best fits our financial capability as it's known at that point of time, which, by the way, will be 6 to 9 months away from now, so we have a little more time to get a better handle on that. So, there's a lot of things that could be done to create a menu of options for us. And we'll make the best financial decisions to get the most bang for the buck, get as much of the project done based upon where we are at that point in time. No, and I don't know, I don't think if we're like $50,000 short on a particular item, we're going to say don't do that one item because we're going to find a way to find $50,000. So I think the conversation is a good conversation to be had, but let's keep it in perspective, because very few things happen in life where you know the end result in advance.
That's true.
So, you work towards a result and you plan and you try to maintain a group focus on the objective, but be careful we don't put ourselves in a box.
And I just want to add to that, Roger, and I agree with you. I think your thoughts are sort of right on. At that stakeholders meeting, I was very interested in hearing what Jackie Lissick had to say in response to the funding. And she said, which I thought was just incredible, let's not look at what we can't do. Let's look at what we can do. And let's look at raising. If it's a $9 million facility, let's make it happen. Don't short sell the goal. And, you put your vision high, which is kind of what we've been doing conceptually. And then if we look at what this community and getting to Shannon Orlandini's letter to say that we're not, excluding Little League, we're not hampering their ability to do all that they do currently and more, that all of those things, all of those goals by various groups will be met and exceeded. But we can only do that if we have that long-term vision. Doing it in phases in terms of how the funding becomes available is completely appropriate. I think that was sort of the intent all along. But to, keep our vision high, don't sit and worry about what it is we can't do, but let's look at what we can do, what is possible. And thinking about, Jackie's approach is to, let's set our vision high because this community deserves it. I mean, if Naples is putting in an $80 million facility, don't you think it's appropriate that we can do a $9 million facility? Let's look at that as an example.
Well, I'll just close. I have to run to another meeting, but I wanted to stop in, as I always do, to try to see if I can answer any questions. But the worst example that I know of, and it was not a community I worked in, but a community that I worked near, and they built a community center and basically outgrew it in 2 years.
That's what you don't want to happen.
So now the good news was it was a huge success. Bad news was they basically had to tear half of it down and rebuild it because they didn't, they were trying to be too economical on the front end. So, I encourage you to keep talking about these things because they are important topics. But I don't really know that we have to have an answer for us to proceed. Not to get hung up on the fact that we don't have an answer just yet on some of these things. So let's keep them on the to-do list. Let's keep working at them, but let's not sort of say that we have to have that answer before we can move forward.
What is it you expect to have in a week? Tell me about a week, some cost?
No, what I said is that we're hopeful that we'll have the land issues resolved. I think we have an agreement in principle with all the parties. Language is being passed
That
along.
sounded pretty well settled. I mean, that sounded pretty well that they were going
Sounded
to.
good.
Yeah, well,
certainly
I
counts.
will tell you that there were some ups and downs and all arounds, but I think where we sit today, is, we have agreements and principles with the two other parties, and now we're just trying to get that memorialized in words, get that to town council for approval and their prospective boards for approval. And that's an issue that's been lingering around for who knows how long. I don't know. It's never been resolved, as far as knowledge, even since the park became part of the town's property or town's assets. So we've got that done. So now, with your help and the community's help, we're moving the chess pieces around on the board. But try to accommodate everyone's great idea, whatever that it might be. But at some point, we need to stop. We need to say, okay, say, 2,500 square foot building or buildings, does it really matter if it's 4 inches over here or 3 inches over there? It really doesn't matter at that point, as long as we know the size of the building. We know we're going to have 2 fields, we know how many square feet each field is. We're going to have X number of courts, we know how many square feet each. We get to the point where we know enough that we could really try to get bids, because then we'll really know where we stand. We'll really know what our options are, and we'll really know how much we're going to have to fundraise. And look, we could say that, I don't like this idea and I don't like that idea, and, but at the end of the day, we may be looking at a decision. We may be meeting in this room sometime in the future and saying, we either agree to put Geico's name on it or we don't get this building. What do you want to do? There'll be people who say, well, I don't want Geico's name.
I don't think it has to come to
I'm
that
just saying,
point.
we may be at that point. I'm just using that as an example.
I don't think it has to come to that point.
Well, I don't know if it will or won't, but if
Well,
it does,
I think we need to do everything under the sun to see that it doesn't.
well, I think,
That really bothers me.
well, I'm sorry it does, but that's reality.
Well, I don't know that that's reality. I don't agree with you there. If we get real creative and we go after grant money like we should do, federal and state grant money, I don't think we need to talk about a Geico community center. So, but that's up to you and the town. All this advisory.
I appreciate your opinion, and I appreciate your enthusiasm, okay? And I'm just saying, I'm not saying that we're not going to try and we're going to fall back on Geico. I'm just saying that it may come down to that. And if it does, this community will make that decision what it wants to do. And it may say no to Geico, and if that's fine. Or they may say yes, and that's fine too. So we'll see what happens. Let's work hard not to get to that point. And I agree with you there. Let's work really hard not to get to that point.
Yes.
Agreed.
But, I'm not taking anything off the table. You might want to take it off the table, and that's fine. You're entitled to your position. I'm not taking anything off the table at this point in time. We're going to work really hard. But all these people who think that there's all these grants out there, okay, I could tell you getting grants, and particularly for parks and recreation type things, has gotten a lot harder in the last 15 years, at least in my lifetime. I do this every year, and I've done it for almost 40 years. 20 years ago, I would say, you know what, we'll be able to get grants up the kazoo, don't worry about it. But I can't tell you that now. I'm not going to tell you that
But
now.
there are grants out there.
There are grants out there.
They haven't all dried up.
At the state level, it's $200,000 a year or less, so it takes you a long time to get a lot of money. And by the way, with COVID or other priorities, whether it's COVID or water or some other thing with the state, and the governor has line item veto abilities, it's not in the bag as it used to be.
Same is true for art and culture grants with the state of Florida, for example. The Florida Division of Cultural Affairs was not only giving millions of dollars in capital improvement projects, CIP projects for communities, but also for program support. That money.
I got one more question. You've got to leave, excuse me, but I got one more question. Has anyone come to you offering a donation in exchange for naming rights?
No, but I believe for that is, the reason for that is two reasons. One is that the plan has not progressed far enough to get to that point where someone would be entitled to do that. And two is, there's been no discussion of what might be an acceptable amount for a thing. So like, or, if a room was, a community room was named after, we wanted to name rights for that, what that might cost versus a field versus, the park itself versus some other things. So
Right, we have to come
tennis
up with a
court. So,
framework.
I think that everyone hopes that there are naming rights opportunities. I could tell you in the last 5 years, I've built 2 parks in 2 other jurisdictions, a park and a community center in another jurisdiction, and there was no money raised via naming rights because there wasn't really any interest in doing that. Now, times change, attitudes change, and that doesn't mean that those possibilities are out there. But in those 2 particular cases, that didn't happen. Now, there was a Veterans Memorial that was raised through 100% through donations. That was done. So, it's not something that we shouldn't try to do. It's not, that we should not leave any rock unturned. But can't say, well, I'm going to do this and hope it comes. You can't do that either. So we have a lot of work to do. And I guess my biggest question going forward is, let's not go backwards. You all have made some decisions. You work on new issues. I'm glad to see that the committee's doing that today. And let's remember to try to be flexible, because we really don't know what the future's going to bring. Let's not take anything off the table. We may say that it's the least preferred option, and that's fine. Let's not take anything off the table because we boxed ourselves into a decision of not doing something because we took something off the table.
And I think really the piece of information about the mosquitoes and the bugs, that's a huge thing to think about in maybe revamping the plan or getting that information to architects and things and see how else we could look at this. That's a huge piece of information today that I've never heard before. Nobody's ever said that when we looked at all of these drawings. So.
Well, look, there are a lot of things we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about lightning warning systems. We haven't talked about a lot of things that are yet to be talked about. So we have a long way to go to vet out all the issues, and that's the importance of keeping these meetings going and the momentum going and discussing various issues. If nothing more, to get them on a piece of paper so we can come back and revisit them later, not necessarily because we have to make a decision about them today. Well, thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you, and we always appreciate your coming in, Roger.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Yes,
Can I speak about the name?
yes, indeed. Let's go back to our naming rights.
Okay, so my feeling, and obviously based on what we're talking about with regard to naming rights, I think for the purpose of this meeting, it's premature for us to really be that specific. My recommendation is for us to talk about the building itself as it's conceptually designed at the moment, as the community center, as the gym, as the welcome center, and leave it at that for the moment until such time as a naming opportunity becomes available in the future. So not to be that specific to make that discussion today. What I do think is important for us to talk about is the general name of this complex in and of itself, because that is obviously not just the grounds, it's the building, it's
Exactly.
it's the center, it's the gathering place, it's the facility itself. So I'm looking at something, and I agree with Lee with regard to Estero Island. I'm looking at Estero Island Parks and Rec. I know Parks and Rec is such an overused, benign kind of description, but it is an accurate one. I'm looking at Island Parks and Rec. I'm looking at, right now, if you look at what Allison Geeson's title is, it is Director of Culture, Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
So what that is, the acronym is CPR. So I'm looking at, and I don't know where the initiative is right now, but if you remember, not long ago, there was this whole resurgence of the concept from the land development plan that we have as a town to call this area the heart of the island. So CPR at the heart of the island sort of sounded great to me. It had, it rings the bell. There's a continuity about life and vibrancy and vitality and the heart of the island and, our rec center in the middle of it. But it is going to be many things. It'll be a gathering place. It'll be for sports. It'll be for community activities. It'll be for fitness. It'll be for social activities. And so it's got to be something that is far more
All-encompassing.
encompassing, exactly. And I like the word commons, and a complex is another one. Center is another one. But I like the idea of Island Parks and Rec, or I just think that it's descriptive. It doesn't have to say Fort Myers Beach. It can say, Estero Island. But we have to be very careful not to have it too long, because if you remember now, we're looking at, we're not talking about Jackson Center necessarily when people are having conversations about this property. They call it Bay Oaks.
Right.
But we have to have something, that is
It
brief.
says it.
But thinking again about the comments made this morning from public, I hope that none of the people at Little League, at that Little League group, would think that we would in any way compromise the best outcome for the Little League and their activities. That is, I think, our number one responsibility, because it is to the youth that we look for the future of our island. And the other thing that we've got to be mindful of is, if it is a budgetary issue, I'm all for, let's scratch the culinary center and put that money toward, making the Little League Park everything that needs to be for our youth. So those are the kinds of discussions, once we get to the budget phase, to say we will not compromise the integrity of what our programs currently offer. We are just interested in adding to, but not short-sighting any activity. That's
Exactly.
my concern. So my recommendation, maybe, Betty, is for us
Yes.
to really sort of think about a generic name for these buildings for the purpose of continuing conversations, not being specific about naming rights per se, but really looking to identify another new name for Bay Oaks.
Right. I think that says an awfully lot. We've had our vision, and we've worked on this for some time. I don't think any of us thought that our concept that we start out with, that's going to be end result. But you have to start someplace, and we certainly did. And we've had that vision, and I think that we realized that we're going to have to do it in phases. There's no way that you could start something like this and put it at ground zero and all of a sudden have 2 or 3 buildings go up, whatever. So, we've been aware of that. And it's the money that's going to have to have a lot of influence on what it's going to be. And so, but all of those things are in the future. And I think that to piggyback on what you mentioned, Barb, is for us to be able to keep that goal and stay high. I appreciated the people that came into our shareholder meeting the other day and the comments that they made. And it was important for us to get the letter from Little League to see just exactly how they felt. I think that we had changed our mind on a couple of things in there. When we started, we weren't thinking of moving fields, but as it progressed, that looked like a possibility. And it also gave us an opportunity to be able to have the band shell that we had talked about and some other things. So it's just like the culinary kitchen that you're talking about. Sure, we want that. We'd like that band shell. We'd like a lot of these things, but it's going to have to come in phases. And I think that we realize that. So I think this is all good discussion for us to have, and certainly not get hung up on one particular item that, well, no, we have to have it that way. I think initially it was a great idea to be able to have a building at that entrance where people would pull underneath there and be able to park and to go in and use the facility and see what it is. Well, we're learning as we go. And I think it's vital that we keep all these things in mind. I don't think there's any concern. I don't have any concern about rights that have already been designated. I remember when the Rod Vale field was taken care of and what was going on down there at that time. It's just interesting to see these things as they come, and those were also phases. I mean, that didn't happen overnight. Appreciate everybody that has put in the effort to get this thing started, and I think that we just need to continue thinking on an overall basis, and I like the idea of having a name for the entire project. I don't like the term project. The vision sounds much better. Arrow Island Parks and Rec, when you talk about all that this island has to offer, that a lot of it comes back to Parks and Rec. I mean, we're talking about Newton property that's down the island. Okay, that's still a part of Parks and Rec. I mean, all of it is. So I don't think that we can just zero in on one little area. And what do the rest of you feel about name for the entire vision that we have, our concept?
Well, it's my recollection, when we started this in October of, our vision was to have something more than simply a Parks and Rec. And I think later we envisioned something for the whole community, more than just the Parks and Rec. And I think Joanne Shamp was dead on. Talked to us about a gathering place.
Yes.
That was my vision from the very beginning. Bring people together in a wide variety of interests. To me, that's more than a Parks and Rec. I think Parks and Rec is narrowing our vision again. I think our vision was more expansive than that. I think that as far as the phasing goes, I don't recollect that this advisory board ever misunderstood or expected to do everything at one time. I think we always fully understood that this would be a phased project.
Goal.
Yes. But I think that's a good thing, because you can revise planning and add planning and subtract planning as you go along in phases. But I recall specifically that our vision throughout these 2 years was a more expansive vision than Parks and Rec.
We can kind
That's
of,
why I suggested something like commons.
Well, I think, and both of you are correct, and I agree 100%. Gathering Place is great. And when we're looking again at Alice's title, which was, conferred by the town of Fort Myers Beach.
Right.
It is Culture, Parks, and Rec. She is the director of Culture, Parks, and Rec. So CPR was sort of the acronym for that.
Part of the island.
Again, what she's now in charge of is Bay Oaks, Newton Park, Roundhouse. And so, yes, you look at all of those, it's parks and it's culture and it's recreation. And they're all encompassing and they're complementary of one another. So, for example, when someone brought up the issue of the library, and that's also been, I think, Jim Adderholt's concern as well, was that, well, if the library is already offering this, why spend money at Bay Oaks to offer a similar thing? What we've determined is that the library can only offer X amount of programming because of their limited space, which if we build the appropriate space, we could fill that gap and bring in the larger groups. So it was that conversation that we had, not to be in competition with any of these other facilities here on the island, but to add to. So, Gathering Place still works well for me. I don't know that Gathering Place really has that connotation of activity, of sports, but it does have the feeling of community. Agreed.
Well, she can be, Allison can be director of Parks and Rec, and Sarah can be director of Gathering.
Are you saying they don't gather at Newton? Because they do.
Yeah,
That's a
they
huge
do.
Sure they
gathering
do.
place for the community.
Yeah.
I mean, I look back at my notes that I took from our February meeting when we started talking about all this, and, it's kind of along the same lines, Barbara, that you're talking about. It's the neighborhood center, it's the social center, cultural center, cultural and sports center, quality of life, heart of the island. I mean, these were all the things that we threw out in that meeting. Somebody even said Estero Island Community Center with the O of community being a heart.
right.
So I don't think we've changed course or thoughts. It's just getting, what is that exact verbiage going to be?
To zero in on it, try to get that. I think that when you start talking about heart of the island, and I always like it when I get a message from Sarah, and at the bottom of it, it always says the heart of the island. And of course, having been on the LPA for many years, that was a part of the comp plan. I mean, that's something that has been a goal for our community from the very beginning, from when we first started this, it became a town. So, heart of the island has an awfully lot of,
Gravitas.
yeah. And it's all encompassing.
And then it will just become the heart. I'm heading over to the heart.
Right.
Still, I never have, and I still don't understand that
Heart of the island,
concept. I don't understand how this area is the heart of the island.
Well, all right,
I've
so-
always had a problem with that, but,
Look,
they can argue it.
We've got your historic society, you've got the
It's the historic
library.
end of the
you've-
island, yeah.
I'm right in the heart of the island. The Historic Society sort of grounds it historically, literally. And then you have Matanzas Bay Preserve, which is our beautiful preserve. Then you have the library, and then you have Bay Oaks. I mean, if that is in the
Single
heart of
most
the island,
historic
literally in the middle of the island.
Single most
school.
historic neighborhood on Fort Myers Beach. between Bay and School Street. But it's the single most historic neighborhood. At one time, years ago, I suggested naming it historic neighborhood. I was laughed at, but okay. But that is a historic neighborhood. I don't think that makes it the heart of the island. I think I don't know. I don't know. I haven't asked, but I wonder what the business owners down at Times Square think about their end of the island. Are they the heart of the island? I don't know. I've just never understood that concept. But again, I'm not arguing that. I just have always had a hard time with that.
I think, I'm thinking geographically, if you look at the footprint of the island, you look at Times Square being the north, we used to call it the short end and the long end years
Right,
ago.
exactly.
And the pier being sort of ground zero. So at the short end of the island is where, that's where the pier was. That's where Garl's Drugstore was.
Yep.
That's where Tip Top was. And then, later on at the long end of the island, that was where, all these condominiums, starting with Santini, Leonard.
Exactly.
Santini, building all at the south end, which sort of like was the new end, but it was also the long end. But the heart of the island, to Lee's point, was exactly, where there was the church, because that was the community center
Right.
originally. That was where, dances were held and parties and so forth. And then you had the library, which was a lot smaller back then, and you always had the Historic Society that, had ended up with their facility on the grounds near the preserve. So I
And the
think
school on the National Register.
right,
Yes,
and
you
the
bet.
school, yes, of course. I forgot about the school, but absolutely. So geographically, the heart of the island is sort of the middle of the island, like our heart is, it's not the foot, it's not the head, it's the
Right.
heart. So geographically, this is the middle of the island, it is the heart of the island, so it makes sense on that level as well. So I still think it's a great connection to make. I know that there was this initiative a while back that was going to really encompass that, and it sort of never took off, and I'm not really quite sure why.
I'm not
but
sure either.
I think this could be an impetus for grounding that initiative.
Well, I think we digress here.
Yes, I think we
Well,
have too.
It's more of
And
the same conversation, but important,
Well,
I
in an
think.
effort to kind of transition, the September 1st meeting, we will have back on the agenda our strategic plan, which, as I'm sure you all remember, we came up with a new vision and mission for Bay Oaks, which may kind of play a role with the naming. So with that also, I believe we kind of have morphed into item B here on the agenda.
Right.
With the grounds, we do need a volunteer within the community or the committee to document all of the monuments on the property. That may also give us a new idea for namings. We have the Wade Jenkins Memorial, Ludwigson. There's a few other properties, so I don't know if someone on the board today would like to volunteer to document description of them, and then that we can bring to the planners. I believe that will also kind of help us with naming rights.
Seems that we have an expert in our audience that is fully capable of providing all that. That would be Charlie, who just mentioned it in public comment.
I'd be willing to help with that.
That would
I
be
think
wonderful.
There's no doubt in my mind that Lee knows a lot of things that I don't.
Well, the names are all there, so I don't know how hard that is to do. I mean, you got,
Recommend that Charlie and Lee get together and put that,
That'd be
that
great.
in writing.
I'll work with Charlie and me, and thank you.
I assume that what we're talking about is not just, well, this one's called Wade Jenkins Field, but sort of telling the story of how it came to be called Wade Jenkins
All the
Field.
information you have would be,
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
I walk by them every day, but I don't know the history like you all do.
All right. Well, I think that brings us back to,
well, excuse me, what do you want us to do exactly?
We just need to make sure we don't leave any of, the historical
Like a list
aspects.
or-
A list,
Yes.
any pictures, any history attached to it, so we can move forward and make sure we don't forget.
Anyone.
Well, there's an $8,500 Little League monument sitting there that I was able to squeeze out of the county to get that big granite monument. The county gave us that money. John Yarborough put up got me that money to put that monument there.
Already
I
know
would
some
hate
of
to
the
see
history.
that, somehow lost in the transition
Exactly,
here,
yes.
because the county did pay for that. And Charlie knows more about the Wade, the kid's name, the field, that happened when I was in college, I think. Yeah, it's just a list you're looking for.
So Lizzie, I'll be in touch with the two of you, just a list, and I mean, right there, you already have more history than I do, so just to make sure we don't forget anyone or any information in this transition.
Right, well, if you two are willing to work on that, we'll put that on the agenda maybe for the next time, or to
yes,
get a
of course.
report, at least see how that list of memorials has been completed. Okay, well then,
Well, one more thing, Charlie, the weight room is named for the Olympian.
Right?
Al Order.
Oh, yeah. Okay, only person I know of, I think he's dead, isn't he? The only person I know of who would know whether he put up money for that or whatever history is, I forget his name, but you'll remember. He was Bay Oaks director when the county owned it. He was a really good guy.
Yakabelli?
Oh, not Yakabelli, the other one. The last one.
Cassie, or, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, before Vicky. Because I think it was named that when he was the director, so we'd have to find him, because I don't know anything I don't know if he gave the money for that or not. I had heard that, but that's a rumor.
I'm not sure who was the director. That name is not coming to mind right now.
Okay, I'll see if I can get a hold of Yarborough, he'll know. Okay, so we put a list together. I think the planner would want that.
Just want to make sure there isn't any piece of history that gets lost in the transition.
That's
And any,
important.
additional information between Charlie, that would be,
We don't want to leave any stone unturned.
exactly, yes.
All right,
And a memorial unturned, right?
that's right. Okay, you have your assignment, should you accept? All right. And let's go on to our department update.
As a few of you may know, we are extending summer camp to better suit the needs of the island. This Friday would have been our last day, but with the Lee County School Board being pushed back, we've extended an additional 3 weeks. We are almost completely full already with the previous campers. So everyone that attended they're eager to come back. We are still utilizing the weight room 3 days a week at a limited hours just due to our resources. We haven't had any issues with overbooking at this time. The pool they're working over there now, so they're coming along nicely. We're still looking at an end of September start.
End of September.
Yes, mid to end of September. I believe their date is the 13th, of which is with the contract signed for. Then staff is also working diligently to have a reopening plan. As you know, we'll have to have the health department, we'll have to have our CES is a company that we work with to come out and make sure the pumps and the filters and everything are running smoothly. So we're eager to get that up and running. It's been long awaited, to say the least. We just onboarded a new full-time recreation aide. Her name is Nicole. Her first day was yesterday. She will be helping staff spearhead additional athletics. As you know, Dominic Earhart left the town mid-March. So this position isn't his previous one, but he had a lot with athletics, and that's what Nicole will be helping both myself and other part-time staff some of our leagues back once we're, obviously able to do so. We are still maintaining ANPRO, who is funded through the county to do nightly cleanings on Friday evenings after summer camp, just as a second measure to make sure everything is being sanitized to greatest capacity. We also recently installed a large piece of plexiglass as an additional shield. So once the go-ahead, we're eager to start welcoming back people. That may be. You guys have any other questions? Those were kind of just the updates that were not on the memo. Could answer any questions.
The school pushed back to now, latest?
The 31st, if that's that Monday, I believe. Change again, but
right now, that's
we're
where it
working
sits.
closely with the school board and all the parents and the campers to try and find a place for the kiddos to go.
Have you heard anything about, I wanted to ask Roger when he was here, but he had to go. In these negotiations with the county, the school board, as to whether they're going to agree to up with some money toward their school kids' after-school programs over there?
As far as the Lee County coming up with additional funding, I know
School district.
in the
Your school.
stakeholders meeting, there was some discussion between the town and the school board about a playground and a mural on the front end. Aside from that information that was shared, that Roger or Chelsea would probably be able to answer that better for you.
I hope this town is still had to price some money out of the school district for the town's after-school program. Pay
What
for
I
it over
heard
at
in that meeting,
Sanibel.
though, is they didn't have, that their contribution, financial contribution would be the land. That beyond that, and because of all the COVID and everything else that they've experienced, they didn't have their cash or whatever, but their financial contribution was the land.
The land.
That's what I remember.
We are working with this, specifically with Beach School Elementary, to provide additional after-school programs for the kids. We do the swim club every Friday, and that's a school club that's hosted at the rec center. So we are working with Principal Manzi and Ms. Renee over there to any program they're unable to host, we try to find a way to kind of.
Any questions of Sarah? Right. Not. Let's move on to public comment, and since we still have our
Have our public here.
public here, would like to have talk again.
Going to the name, when we had the 5-year plan committee that they, when I was vice chairman here, they put me on a 5-year plan committee when we bought the Bay Oaks from the county. We spent probably about 8 hours trying to pick a name. And we went through the same kind of, ideas that you guys were, and that's when we came up with the Bay Oak Recreational Campus. The reason we put that was because it included everything. It was a tough name to come up with, and we came up with every one you guys did probably 10 times and fought about it for another 6 hours, and that's just what we came up with. We had a lot of good ideas. If you guys ever want a copy of that plan, probably available through the town. I threw mine out because pretty much we didn't do anything in it after we wrote it. So obviously one of the things that we were supposed to do was take care of the school board issue and the town issue with the roadway run through there. So obviously we didn't do anything that we were supposed to do back then. So hopefully that we've done it now and it's taken care of. We can move forward with this process and now do some changes. So new plan for Bay Oaks that I have seen actually downsizes square footage, if you take that building away. So I think that critically that building in the back there, unless there's something seriously wrong with it that I don't know about, it really has to stay into the plan in order to make this a better plan, of a downsized plan for square footage. I think it's very important to keep what everybody wants and not to get rid of it. If what was included was I think you guys mentioned that you were a food facility to make food. That was also included in the 5-year plan. That was to be included in the outside of Bay Oaks, just to the left of where the utilities come into the side of the building. Those were things that we definitely looked at back then and were definitely included in the plan and thought were necessary back then. I think they still are in order to be able to produce certain things. Locker rooms and storage facilities, like I mentioned before, we have 7 outbuildings that could be converted into one building and one mezzanine building that could store all the equipment. So I think it's very important that as this design develops, that you not only include Little League, but the soccer club who hasn't been yet talked to, boss program, and people like that to include what they might want in this facility and where they might want it, because the locations, like I say, the mosquitoes are just one issue. I could bring up 10 other ones right now with the way the plan's set up. So I think, you know, as we go further with the plan set up and spending more time trying to set this plan up, I think the value thing is to communicate with your strategic alliances, all the groups that are using Bay Oaks, one by one, get them in here and say, hey, what do you need out of this facility? What are you requiring? What is going to be something that's going to, you know, be better for you, or is this going to be the same for you? But what are we offering that's better? Because in order to get those groups behind you and help raise that money that you're all going to be looking for, because in reality, this is a $17 million final project. So if you go to the public and say, now we want 5, sooner or later, you're going to have to get 17 from them. You can't say now that, you know, 5 is going to do this project, this is what we've got. You've got to say that there is going to be more that's going to be needed, and they're going to have to stand behind that. In order to stand behind that, they're going to want the things that they've been looking for all these years. Even when we wrote that 5-year plan, we included all the community, we brought them in together. We spent 40 hours writing this book that completely got avoided. We don't want that to happen again. This is a huge plan with a lot of money involved, and if you don't include all the stakeholders into it and you don't include everybody's ideas, then it'll just end up washing away like the other park probably will be in the.
Rick, by the way, I read that plan.
Did you? You got a copy of it? It was pretty thorough and it was put together.
It was thorough. There were interesting things in it.
Yes. And it took a lot of time to draw that plan, and it was drawn up by some great
I
people
remember
in the
that
community.
committee, yeah.
Here, so.
I don't necessarily agree with your idea that the 17 million.
That's actually from your estimator. So you know, I've got that from your estimator. I didn't come up with that plan. I got that in email from your project manager.
This is the first I've heard of
I'm
it.
just telling
First
you.
I've heard of
I'm
that,
just telling you. That's where I got it.
where I heard.
And
I got an email back from, and that's what we got as an estimated cost.
well, from who did you get that?
I believe it was the RMP guy.
Yes, it was.
Paul?
Gentleman that was here with the stakeholders meeting that had the presentation.
Lee, I mean, you've got to understand, you look at that drawing and you look at the concept and some of the numbers I shot out today. It's not conceptual for 5 million, you know that. It's not. It was never conceptual for 5 million. That's why I say we need to get everyone, not just part of the people behind this, but you got to get more community support behind something of this nature in order to earn $17 million. That 17 million is a projected budget right now, what you've already planned. You add or subtract or even change anything, we're going
It
up,
surprises
down.
me because Paul knows that Roger had looking at 10 millions tops, and that included hours over at
Bayside and Times Square.
Bayside and Times Square. That surprises me that Paul came up with that number, and I think this is the first we've heard of it.
Yeah, but we also at that meeting, remember, Lee, we added so many more things in that community building, like the staging and the lights and the
Yes.
sound systems, and you know, all that costs a ton of
You
money.
bet.
I mean,
And
when you're
I can
doing
tell you
that kind of
there's
thing.
still a lot missing. You know, when you
Yeah,
look at the
exactly.
conceptual drawings that I got, I can tell you that there's still probably at least a couple $1 million worth of things still missing.
Because we haven't even started to build out the interiors of any of this.
So, I mean, I've been in construction my whole life, Lee, and you know, looking at that construction cost of that building, the artificial turf, the moving of the poles, the moving of the lights, the moving of the drainage systems, the moving of the utilities that are underground, everything has to be done from the concept that I've seen. There's not one thing that has to be underturned in that property. Underground work alone, my estimate is probably about a year and $5 million. talking about a lot of drainage, where you're taking out all your drainage work there, you're putting all your drainage work, all your utilities back in, all your light poles, all of your field, all the drainage system. It's a massive project undertaking. Yes, I do worry about the time down, and of course, scheduling is going to be critical, because if we lose one season on these fields, the league, soccer, whoever, chances are coming back. I'll be honest with you, these leagues are tough to keep together in the situations we are these days with the amount of kids in the island. Lose it for a year, it's going to be very tough to rebuild that whole program again. There are a lot of things to consider in this
I
project.
think we need to talk with Paul about this.
Definitely.
I'm at a loss on this. I know we added things. That doesn't mean they're gonna get in, everything's gonna get in. Well,
But I mean,
I don't
I
have any
think
illusions about that.
there were just so many more things that were brought up at that meeting that were not considered. And so I'm sure as we're talking, he's like itemizing
Everything
in
is
his
going
head.
through.
As
You bet.
I'm a guy who, I'm a businessman, so as I look at things as the total cost, what am I gonna look at in the future, what am I gonna look at now, how far am I gonna go with this, how much can I afford now, how much can I afford in the future, and I understand how you're phasing it. But the cost of the total project is the cost of the total project, no matter how you look at it. You can say, I'm gonna phase it, say I'm gonna spend $5 million now to do this, but when you look at the total cost of the project, we wanna get out of it exactly what we need as a community. But do we want to lose that center for the cost of that square footage alone is a lot to rebuild. But do we want to spend the money to replace the roof in 10 years when it's going to be due again? Or do we want to knock that building down and move it somewhere else because it's more convenient having it up front? I always agreed with the concept of having something up front because it draws people into Bay Oaks. Of course. You know, it brings people to, and buying that property was always a key for Bay Oaks to have that frontage, because even when we tried to put a sign up for Bay Oaks, the library fought us on that. They didn't want it in their ditch in the front of the side of the property.
Exactly.
So, you know, having that frontage is important, having that building up front is important for the community, for them to get to, for them to have access to. Now, keeping the building in back, we've always had problems with access in the back because some people can't get back there for functions. Why don't we take some of that swampland that's back there where we're going to put that second field, make them kids stand, make that into parking, make that into 15, 20, 30, 40 more spots for handicapped people to get back to the larger center. So we can have them larger community events back there and not have to worry about people getting back there and having to run buses
I
back
think
and
you're
forth
right
to
about
run.
that. And I think
You know,
the
so there's a
parking
lot
idea
of
back there is a
great
good idea.
ideas that can come from the spending of this money. I think it's a matter of trying to bring it all into a great plan, you know, and is this the best plan? I don't know. You know, it could be. Do we have 17 million to spend? I don't know about that, but I do think that garnering public support for a plan that fits everybody is the best thing we can do, because it's the only way it's going to get approved, and the only way that we can go out there as a group. The Little League can go out there as a group, the soccer club can go out there as a group, the boss can go out there as a group, and start doing what you asked. Get money. We can
We've
get
had-
money. I
we've
mean,
had-
we can raise money. Trust me, I know we can.
We've had one stakeholders meeting and everyone was invited. That will be the first of many. So it's not that we're not doing that.
Oh, I know.
That is our intent. So we
As I say, the
want
project
input
has
from
to
all
meet
of
the
the
stakeholders'
stakeholders,
ideas,
absolutely.
you know,
But
and
I do think we're off to a great first start.
Oh, any investment in Bay Oaks is a great start. We've been here for 20 years trying to get somebody to invest in Bay Oaks and do something with the center and make a difference and make a change. And Little League ourselves, we've been investing, you know, in the park, and we've been told, you know, no longer invest in the park until we see where the future is going. But we always want to keep investing in the park because we realize that this park is always going to be here. And like I say, it is the center, whether it be a community campus or a center or whatever it is where the community goes. And the other thing about artificial turf that did worry me, like I say, is I want to make sure that these kids are able to play. At one time when Anita was mayor, we had the lights on 24/7 at night because we thought that kids needed a place to stay. Like you say, it's the center. It's where everybody's got to go. We don't have backyards. You know, we don't have a place where our kids can play. So we bring them up here. We bring them to the center, and sometimes in the evening it gets dark early, so they were turning on the lights for everybody all the time and leaving the gates open. That's what the future of Bay Oaks needs to be. It needs to be a place where the fields aren't locked at night, the bathrooms aren't locked at night, it's safe for children to go to, there's nobody hanging out there that shouldn't be. And that if you want to go up there and play baseball or kickball or basketball with your son or daughter, that's where you go. You know, it's always free and always open.
Except during
the problem.
turtle nesting season.
And, you know, that is an issue. And I'll
Because
bring
turtle
that up.
nesting season, those lights need to be off, because you can see those lights from Sanibel.
Let
You
me ask you a
bet.
question, though. If there's not a turtle nest on the beach yet, because turtle season has just begun, or let's say one turtle is laid, our season is over as of,
For 31st, I believe.
no,
This
our
turtle season.
baseball
Yeah, no,
season
our
is over.
baseball
Our
season,
baseball
yeah.
season is over,
I'm
right when
thinking turtle
nesting season
season.
begins. We have literally shut our lights off and let our children leave the field in the dark to their car to leave the fields unsafe because it was 9 o'clock.
They knew when the time was.
Was there a turtle nest on the island at the time?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Okay.
Rules are
Then-
rules.
yeah, yep, you
Rules are
bet,
rules.
yep, you gotta follow them,
Safety.
yep.
Putting
gotta have
safety
some
over
guidelines.
children's lives.
Then,
So,
then the adults need to be aware of what the rules are,
well,
and
my
then they make
question-
sure that that kid is off that field before the deadline. Very simple solution
Okay.
to that.
May, number one.
Anyway,
We don't
we're not
have
here
the-
to-
We
we're
don't have the
here-
availability to make our schedule, where our schedules
Okay.
are made by somebody in another location. So what that does is say, and I'll be honest with you, what that does is say, don't play a game on the Little League field during Little League season, during turtle season.
Right,
So,
I have-
now,
I have-
is there a way?
We can't
now,
change
My question
that.
is there a way to put up a light system that wouldn't interfere?
No,
Have you ever
here I
investigated that?
believe is our solution, is because with this new concept, we will have indoor facilities available for these kids to participate. There'll be an indoor basketball
We've never
gym,
been able
for
to use indoor
example.
fields.
Yeah, and so,
never been
and we'll
allowed.
have indoor pickleball courts, so kids will have an opportunity to do that. There'll be opportunities for evening community events for teenagers, to keep them off the streets and keep them cared for.
never
That
had
will all
that.
be available in the evening. Increased programming for all ages will be available safely and not impacting the turtles.
Exactly.
Anyway,
So
I
we've
did,
never
But, yeah,
need to be
Yeah.
you know, a symposium. but-
Right.
But thank you for your comments.
appreciate it. Thank you. Okay,
Don't worry,
Charlie,
Rick is wordier than I am this morning. It doesn't happen much, but it happened today. I am gratified to hear a lot of what I've heard this morning. I mean, I know that you guys are all about what's best for the future of Bay Oaks. There's a couple of things that just came up. Number one, there were years in the past, Little League seasons in the past, where we worked with the Turtle Time folks to get permission to leave the lights on later because specifically there were no turtle nests in sight of the lights. There's no reason at all that can't continue. There's no reason at all that the town's natural resources people and our friend Eve from over at Turtletown can't get their heads together, and if there's no nest to be affected by the lights, leave the damn lights on.
May I respond to that, please?
Sure, of course. This is your meeting, not mine.
yeah,
I want to clarify something. It's not the question of how many nests are on the beach. Turtles are looking to those lights when they're way out in the Gulf. And if they see those lights, that's not a good thing for them in terms of when they're going to come onto the beach. It's before they do the nesting. It's to get them onto the beach to begin their nest. Those lights have to be off.
And I don't pretend to be an expert on those issues. What I will tell you is that the town's natural resources folks and the Turtle Time folks put their heads together and determined that having the lights on after 9 o'clock would not be detrimental to the turtles, and it was permitted.
Okay, well then if they agree to it, then I
Yep.
support that.
yeah,
Right.
that was,
I think we should invite Eve Haverfield here to explain that to us.
certainly,
So
certainly.
let's invite Eva Haverfield
Okay.
here.
I think
She's
that's
the expert.
an excellent idea.
She's the one I want to hear from.
Right.
I agree, Rick. I agree, Rick. That, you know, because I know people don't like to talk about it, but that area has been a problem in the past
You bet.
with some seedy characters. It's the reason, although they won't admit it, it's the reason the school system put the fence all around the school. That's the reason. So that should tell us something right there. But I think we ought to talk to Eve Haverfield. I'd like to have her come to a meeting if she would.
Happy to extend an invite.
Other thing I wanted to mention, Lee and I apparently agree on, my guess is this is the second thing that he and I will agree on this morning. When I sat here in the stakeholders meeting, I was not shocked to hear the bureaucrats from the county and the school system say that there was no money available and that the land will be the extent of their involvement. There needs to be a lobbying effort, not of the bureaucrats, but of the elected officials who hold those purse strings. There's no excuse at all for the county not to pay for 1/3 or so of the project cost and the operational cost going forward for Bay Oaks.
I don't have any problem doing it in Sanibel.
That's correct. They do it in
Yep.
Sanibel,
You
they
bet
do
they
it
do.
in Bonita Springs. So there's no reason at all they shouldn't do that here. Of course, and the school district folks are in the same boat. They're always, you ask the bureaucrats, are always going to tell you there's no money. When you go down to the school board meeting, who you're speaking to is the elected officials. You can speak to them individually anytime you run into them. They all like their jobs and they want to keep them,
You bet.
and they want us to vote for them. And when they say there's not money, that's not the case. When I was on the Bay Oaks Advisory Board back in the Stone Age, when the county and town were still operating it jointly,
Right?
the county had plenty of money for that. They did lots of studies showing where the users came from. And as you guys are aware, there are a ton of users from outside the town.
Oh, yes.
You're listening to one. You know, there's things that, I mean, that money is there, and they should damn well come up with it.
Agreed.
You bet. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, well, there are volunteers, yeah.
You're
Rick
right.
wants me to say that the users and volunteers come from off the island,
You bet.
because that is also the case.
Stakeholders meeting that the chairwoman of the school board didn't come instead of sending a bureaucrat, because I'd like to hear from.
Lee, you and I both know that's why they send the bureaucrats.
She
They send the
she
bureaucrat
didn't-
down here to tell them
She
to
wasn't
say
going to
no.
tell us much. She wasn't going to tell us much.
Right.
So, and I don't know that the chairwoman would, but I'd rather have the chairwoman sitting there for my questions. But I agree with you. I said it before. I hope this town really works hard to, in negotiations with that school board, because I think we can get more than just some of the land.
Well, at yesterday's
more.
meeting, there was a lot of people in here talking about tangentially related topics, if you will, talking about how we have a family island, we need to take care of the kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to expect all those folks to be back in here at budget time telling the town council that the taxes need to go up so they can properly fund Bay Oaks.
There you go.
I'm not holding my breath.
All right.
That's what ought to go on.
We'll be there with you. Thank you, Charlie. Okay.
If you don't mind, Betty, with that being said, there is a meeting on September 17th that will also discuss the Bay Oaks redevelopment. We'd like to give that an opportunity for anyone on the board that would want to speak. Consensus of
A council meeting?
I'm sorry?
Council meeting?
Council meeting, yes.
August 7th.
August 17th at 9 a.m. It's a
We're
Monday.
going to
I
discuss
believe.
Bay Oaks?
August 17th, September.
September 17th at 9 a.m., yes.
September 17th.
September 17th.
We're going to discuss Bay Oaks?
Sorry?
We're going to discuss
Yes,
Bay
the
Oaks.
redevelopment.
What is our next meeting in September?
Our next meeting will be September 1st.
Okay.
September 1st.
Here's what I'd like to do. I assume Paul will be here. Hopefully he'll be here. I would like to discuss with Paul this idea that Rick presented on the rear of the property and perhaps putting parking back there.
And
Because I think he's got a good point. The closer you are to those mangroves, mangrove forests, the more unpleasant it could be.
right.
I mean, I like walking through Serve like anybody else does, but my God, I try not to do it in the summer. But I think that's worth a discussion, Paul, as to parking. I still think we need to discuss more about parking. Anyway, And is that feasible? So, to parking back there? I would like to put that on the agenda.
Okay?
Just have a question. At what point on this property is the no-see-ums and mosquitoes issue? I mean, obviously, there's a magic line that exists that, it's a problem here, but 10 yards further inland, it's not a problem. So how much space are we talking about between the mangroves and a usable space? You wouldn't be
don't know.
inundated by mosquitoes.
I don't know, but I know that you've got a lot of indoor activities on this property.
Just you go back,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Oh,
very
yeah.
easy. You can go back there in the evening, first between probably $50.
Well, is it a 50
Really?
or is it 100? That
Yeah.
is my
I mean,
question.
you gotta depend on rainy season. This is
Right?
what time of year you're back there and what day you're back there.
Agreed. But that can be true anywhere on this island, is my point.
Closer to
Inclined to agree with Rick. I think
go out there and visit.
maybe that area is better for parking in the first place, anyway.
Could be.
All right. Is there still a homeless problem over behind old Casey's and through there?
Officers don't even know what happened.
I will say on that point, we do have the beach and street enforcement. They come through regularly, and there is a strong Lee County Sheriff presence. We do frequent walks of the facility to help limit that. As you know, the facility's not as used as frequently now with the closures. But we do still have staff on site doing walks, I agree with
The other day
Rick.
that you can't.
Well, the government can stop them from camping on public property.
Sarah, I have a question for you. You said the meeting at town council was
It is
September.
August 17th. The September 21st meeting is a budget meeting, so I am,
Okay, so it's August 17th.
August 17th, yes.
Okay.
It's a big
Looking at the
difference.
calendar, there's
Yeah.
meetings all up and down.
But our
so.
September meeting is what date?
BORCAB's meeting will be September 1st at 9 a.m. The council meeting would be August 17th. Then there also is a budget meeting September 21st, so that was the confusion. If anybody from the board would like to speak at advisory board items on that 17th, I'll send out an email. I don't know, Betty, if you're available. I know Barbara, you were originally going to speak.
I'm just looking at my calendar, and I've got a dentist appointment for a crown on the 17th at 10 o'clock. So I'm not available on the
I'm out of
17th.
town.
You're out of
I
town?
leave on the 13th for a couple of weeks.
We still have a problem
Can I
with-
ask?
I mean, well, maybe that's not the right word. Are there still some issues between our committee and the Little League Board? That's an issue.
On the 17th?
Yes, I am.
I mean, I'm just looking at my calendar.
Okay.
The dentist.
Because I know you weren't the other day when we were supposed to do it
I read the
yesterday.
letter, so.
Yeah, I was already planning to do it
Is that-
yesterday when
Rick, is that about the only issue?
it was changed.
Several issues,
Do it yesterday.
further with an email.
I think it should be. Okay, I for one want to resolve any issues we might have with the Little League. That's right, that's right.
To make sure that what's there. Whether we could leave. And out, it'd probably be a better idea because.
It's one of the advantages,
Was
yeah.
the soccer league
So there are
invited
pluses
to
and
that
minuses to
stakeholder
everything.
meeting?
It
Did they
just takes a
come?
while to work through what's going to be
I don't
right.
remember hearing from them.
But not
What we need.
president.
Well, I'm sensitive to the Little League. I never played soccer, but I was in the first Little League here. I was the first star. And, wasn't a star, but, sometimes I played. So I'm sensitive to the Little League. And I don't want, if there's issues, I want to resolve them because
Sorry to interrupt. Any issues, any recommendations, feel free to forward to myself, and I send that immediately to Paul and Chelsea. Because I know things pop up in the middle of the night. For instance, the mosquitoes, that's a great point. I'll be happy to share that with Paul as we continue the process.
Was going to
See
be.
it, but the kids are really.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
no,
there.
it was in there.
does the soccer league have a problem or issue?
No, I haven't talked to Beth yet, part of it, so.
They were invited to the last stakeholder meeting, but I don't think they showed
On
up.
the looks of what your plans,
Okay,
you use this, or they're smaller, we've had one of our stuff, Kelly Road, ice of the field. Will they move some of it? A lot of it pertains. Like I said before, tougher and tougher. One thing is we're gonna have to put on is bad. Little League, other sports that are starting to go bigger, like football is a great program that they.
Cross.
I want to make sure that all these will work. Our program, all these programs, multi-purpose. Also play adult softball. I love it. Not right now. All of us want to be able to use.
they have a league here? Do they have a softball league here? I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah, it's great. Very serious.
Huge,
We take it
huge
very
I
softball
haven't been
leagues.
to it, okay. Well, that's,
Mixed and men's. Yeah.
play on the big field, I
Yes,
assume.
we. Great time, man. Enjoyable for all the adults. I think we have 5 to 6 off island to play. Over in our teams represent.
You bet. I don't think this part is being recorded.
It's picking them up, but any other conversation, you may need to go.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah. Okay.
these things work wonders.
Okay, well, Barbara has said that she would be here on the 17th,
Wonderful, thank you, Barbara.
and so, okay.
I probably will too.
You will too? Good, good. And Lee. All right. Board member items. Karen, have you got anything for us?
Don't have anything else.
Okay, Lee?
Well, I wish we could have, would have, discussed more, at least the name of, name suggestions for the overall complex. Well, I think we need to get into that. I would agree that we probably should do that. I would rather do that with the full advisory board.
Yes, that would be helpful.
But I urge you again to bring your ideas. Barbara and I, and Aaron shouldn't be alone in this. I mean, I'd like to hear from everybody.
Yeah.
And I think, and I may get shot down on this, but I think we need to discuss more discussion, this idea of naming rights, because it bothers me. Somehow it ends up too often around the country with corporate names. And does this advisory board want that to happen? I realize, I understand what Roger's saying, and although I would argue something else, I would argue it's up to him, town, to go find the money. But it would be my position to find the money without taking it from Geico to name the gym Geico Gym. I mean, that's how I feel about it. But I would like to get a consensus of this advisory board as to what we would advise the elected council to do about this naming rights thing. I would hate to see it go that far. Even some people on the beach who may want to put their company name on the community center, and I'm just opposed to it. But I think we need to discuss that. Maybe I'm wrong.
And I just want to clarify for the record, when I brought that up, I in no way, no intention at all of having corporate names or community names. It's individuals.
Yes.
Individuals who are interested in donating, becoming honorary member, whatever it may be.
That is great.
But not
great.
a corporation, not a business, not anything like
So
that.
that leaves the door open then. I'm glad you explained that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That helps me with my worries, but then that opens the door again to what we believe would be good names. What we believe would be names that maybe it will come to the Blue Heron Community Building or the Pelican Gym, right? I don't know.
Right.
Only if the Pelicans donate.
But Lee, I have to tell you, Roger
It just won't be.
Roger did state here today that yes, and we would prefer, obviously, we would all unanimously prefer to have, the town pay for this, and certainly maybe friends with contributions, some other kind of individual, generosity from the island. Definitely, that would be the preferred mechanism. But
Preferred,
then I guess the ruling out of corporate, it would be to the exclusion of not building this building, was a question for us to ask in the future. So I
Right.
think he leaves the door open, but certainly
indeed.
I think unanimously our preferences are,
I would like to go beyond preference. I would like, and I don't know if I'll win this one, but with a full advisory board, I would like this advisory board to advise or recommend to the council that they absolutely don't do that. I mean, I'm not, he will talk about the preferred and what happens in the end but this advisory board doesn't have to do that. And
And
so,
it's really too bad we're not farther along, because this year, all donations for 501c is 100% deductible, every bit of it. So it's too bad that we're not further along
Right,
in this
exactly.
process, because it's been such an incentive for people who, in the tax bracket that they are in, to donate, because they're getting 100% write-off on it.
exactly.
So, but we're not that far. We're not at that point.
unfortunately, no.
I know.
But, so, at some point, maybe in September, I don't know if we're gonna have a full board. But I would like that to be on the agenda and discuss. I think we need come to a consensus advisory board. We want to advise the council on.
Yeah, I don't want a Lonnie.
No. Oh, my God, no.
No,
I don't want to lie.
They're looking for better PR.
yeah, they certainly are.
No, we were already saying it a long time ago. We were a mile ahead of you.
Right?
We just kept it real quiet.
Okay, I have to.
Okay. Lee, did you have anything else?
No.
Just just under board member items. Okay. Barb?
Nothing more from me.
Okay, and I don't have anything else. So our next meeting is September 1st, and appreciate Lee and Barb if they're able to come to the August 17th Town Council meeting. That's greatly appreciated, so.
Yeah, I'll give a report on behalf of the Bay Oaks Advisory Board.
Yes,
Right.
exactly, exactly.
I can talk too, can I?
Make us
Oh,
proud.
yes, Yep.
Make us proud.
Absolutely.
make us look good. Okay, if there's nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Barb?
Barbara.
And Karen? Okay, we are adjourned at 11:05. Again, thank you, fellas, for being here this morning. Appreciate it.
Charlie,
Okay,
was it? Pro basketball coach Costello.
Costello, yeah.
Did they name the gym for him?
They named a court for him.
Floor was named for him.
One court.
Did they take it off the floor when they
No,
changed
I
it?
don't know, but they named one of the
Thank
two
you.
courts for Larry Costello.
okay. See you on the street.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Uh-huh, thank you.
I wrote that for the sandpaper back when there was Bay Oaks movement and Nancy came to me.
You already did your homework that quick.
No, that's, well, there's stuff in there.
Awesome.
Surprised that nobody brought it up at the meeting. I don't know.
Hey, the Little League loves you guys,
Someone's like, we
you know?
can't hear it.
There's no conflict there, there's just a question of
That's what it was, and then the music started
wanting to
playing.
be involved and help out, you know what I mean?
Let's see if I can get a hold of Yarborough.
Do you get that?
Yeah.
He'll know, he should know about
Monument,
order.
or whether there was actual money.
Or he'll know the name of the guy I'm trying to think of, who was the director.
None of that applies to this. This is the first time I.
Oh, and I should remember it, but I'm not, it's not.
He was the best guy.
On record.
He helped me
Just
get,
so you
me
know,
and Yarborough
You might have to
helped
recreate
me
the
get
first,
that,
whatever
Little
happened.
League.
I got most of it in my head.
Yeah, the founders monument.
I put the names on it,
Yeah.
but they got me the monument.
Yeah.
It's $8,500.
Yeah, that's one of
I
those,
don't
that
want
needs
that
to
thing to
stay
get
too.
lost in the movie.
Right, no,